Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's GP Strategies webinar. My name is Kayla Rotz, Marketing Manager for GP Strategies, and I am very happy to be your host for today's event. If you joined us before, we are glad to have you back, and if this is your first session with us, well, a big welcome goes out to you. We have a great discussion planned today. Marianne Masarek and Colleen Casey have joined us to talk about employee engagement strategies. Marianne is the lead consultant for GP Strategies Engagement Practice. She creates practical tools and strategies that clients worldwide apply to create successful businesses and thriving workplaces. She's passionate about great days at work where individuals experience the highest level of personal satisfaction, apply their skills to what matters most, and deliver their best work to drive their employer strategies. Colleen is a consultant in our engagement practice with a passion for opinion polling and understanding how others see the world and what shapes those perceptions. In her current role, she uses the insights gained from engagement surveys to help organizations better understand how employees view their culture and how they can implement meaningful change based on employee feedback. So without further ado, Colleen, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to you.
Thanks so much, Kayla, and welcome to the webinar, everyone. We're really excited to talk about this topic with you today, which is something that we're very passionate about and close to our hearts. We're going to be talking today about how you can make engagement a top organizational priority even during these turbulent times. And in order for us to do that, we're going to talk about what engagement is and who's responsible for creating this engaging work environment. And we're also going to discuss what do people need now? And we're going to do that by looking at this framework that I'll refer to as the 4Cs, and we'll go into depth a little bit later in the presentation. And then we'll conclude our session today with just questions and discussions to work out some of the things that might be top of mind for you. Before we jump into the content, though, I want to acknowledge that some of you might be feeling skeptical about this topic. You might be asking yourself if this is really the right time to be talking about engagement. When we look at what's going on around the world with unemployment claims stacking up around the United States and really around the globe, the COVID crisis making even going to the grocery store feel like a complicated logistical outing. You might say to yourself, why even bother with engagement at all? Shouldn't we just be happy to have a job and to not be sick? I understand those concerns, but Marianne and I genuinely feel that addressing engagement has never been more critical to your organization's success. And what we want to do today is explore strategies and targeted actions that employees at all levels of the organization can take to not only maintain their own engagement, but also support the engagement of those they work with. But before we jump into those strategies, we wanted to hear from you, and we're going to start off the session today with an activity to see how all of you are managing at the moment.
Great, and thanks, Colleen. So we want to know about your reality. What's getting in the way of your engagement right now and the engagement of your colleagues? So you can use the chat feature that you can go down the bubble in WebEx at the bottom, the little chat icon. If you click on it, you can send a chat to respond to the question, what's the biggest engagement disruptor that you're experiencing now? And Colleen, as the responses are coming in, would you mind sharing your disruptor?
Absolutely. I think that probably for me, what I felt the most the past 2 months now is just the emotional roller coaster. So, oscillating from day to day from, happy and feeling hopeful to other days where I feel quite the contrary, the stress, the anxiety, all of those things have been something that's been impacting my engagement at work.
So I too have been on quite the roller coaster where some days I'm filled with hope, other days not so much. And it looks like folks are a bit reluctant to share their realities. So I'm actually going to move on here, and we can get into some of the strategies that can really help in creating a more engaged workforce. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about what engagement looks like and what it means. And engagement represents a relationship between your organization and its workforce. And like any relationship, there are two pieces. So you've got the organization on one path, which is blue, and the workforce made up of individuals in green. It's a really personal relationship. And it's not just about satisfaction, commitment, or discretionary effort. Full engagement happens when you're giving maximum of what the organization needs, and you're also getting what you're looking for from work. We have a link at the end of the slide deck to a video that explores the details of this both-and relationship. But for today, I really want you to keep in mind that the goal is to get folks to this orange point where they're giving and getting as much as possible. And this is where great days at work happen. We want to have more people in this spot more often. The other thing to remember as we're talking today is that engagement is individualized, and how our different organizations and how each of us as individuals define success will shape that relationship. And I think in many ways, social distancing requirements and the regional realities of COVID-19 have magnified those differences. For example, I haven't had to add the role of distance learning teaching assistant to a cooped up 10-year-old to my daily list of responsibilities, but I know many of my colleagues have, and I'm going to guess many of you today are in that situation as well. So whenever you're thinking about engagement, you want to be thinking about individuals. Now, Colleen, I think it's fair to say, without running one of our surveys, that many people are not up in that orange part of the model. So who's actually responsible for helping people get there?
So it starts with each individual that works in the organization. And a lot of times when we talk about this, we say that individuals need to own their own engagement. And what we mean by this is that each individual, we all need to understand what fuels our satisfaction and what can unleash our discretionary effort. If you don't know what that recipe looks like for you, you're never going to be able to find it on the job. But we also know that managers have a role to play. Managers are really at the intersection of the individual and the organization. They need to align individual talents and drivers of satisfaction with organization and team priorities, while at the same time building trust and relationships with their people. And of course, our executive population, this group is really responsible for establishing the organization's strategic goals, and they also embody the organization's culture through their actions, behaviors, and words. We need this group, more perhaps than any other group possibly, to be committed to engagement, because they're the only ones who can make this an organizational priority and part of how we get the work done on a regular basis. One thing I want to point out here is how important the engagement of our manager and executive population is. This group is going to have a huge impact on engagement of their employees, because it's really difficult to inspire others to high levels of satisfaction and performance when you're not experiencing that yourself. So we've talked about what engagement is, why this is important, who is responsible for creating that engaging work environment. Now the question comes of, how do we act on this now, given the current chaotic climate? So we've identified 4 key areas for workforce engagement: contribution, connection, communication, and confidence. And this is a framework that we've actually been using with our engagement survey clients as we help them measure the factors that are impacting employee engagement during these turbulent times. So let's talk about these 4 different areas, why they're important, and what are some strategies that everyone can implement in order to address them. And we're going to start off with this question of contribution. Contribution is important still because in spite of everything, your employees need to feel that they are making a difference. Work is an essential part of our identity and gives us a sense of meaning and purpose in life. A 2018 Pew Research Center study found that career and work came in second place when Americans talked about what gives them meaning in life. This was second place after family, and this was before money. So we know that work is an essential part of what gives us a sense of purpose. Now, Marianne, what are some ideas that you have for how we can support employee contribution even now?
So I think what we're talking about, we're looking at three things. Do I understand what needs to be done? Do I have the tools I need to be successful? And do I have options in how to get my work done in an upended work environment? And the significant logistical challenges of resources and flexibility have been in the headlines, and I think they've really consumed many organizations in the last month. And as I look ahead, I think the biggest ongoing challenge is actually clarity of work priorities, because we know things change overnight. Stay-at-home orders are constantly revised in different directions in our different communities. Organizations are responding to those directives. They're responding to customer behavior and to the economic fallout that's happening. So they're shifting their strategies. They're shifting what they deliver and how. Some are actually hiring. A lot more are operating with fewer people working fewer hours. So right now, you want to redefine success. Not everything's important. Not everything is possible. And we can't give up on contribution completely, but we need to determine what it looks like now. And we need to continue to make progress. And this is certainly a leader responsibility, but no one should wait. You know, if you're an individual contributor or you're a manager, look at your list of 10 to-dos from last week and think about which two or three are most important now. And then calibrate your understanding with your manager. And if you're a manager with a team, you want to make sure you have those conversations. And you need to have them with individuals this week. You need to have them next week. And most likely you're going to have to keep on doing those check-ins because of how things are changing. And it's really important because lack of focus leads to paralysis, and paralysis is demotivating. And then that's going to represent this huge stumbling block to achieving the meaning that Colleen mentioned when we came into this slide. So let's move on to the next C that we have, which is connection. And the news is full of examples of how we're all social distancing and still figuring out a way to connect, and that's a good thing to be doing in uncertain times, and it's a good way to help process feelings of loss and grief. We also know from our research that job satisfaction is not just about what you do every day, it's affected by who you do it with. So, Colleen, I'm going to flip things over to you for ideas for what folks can do to provide the type of connection that people need right now.
Absolutely. So I think it starts with this whole question of cultivating community. And what I really mean by this is how do we maintain relationships with our peers and colleagues? So for those of us who are working from home, I think this means changing the ways that we connect. It's no longer as easy as just walking over to someone's desk to have a chat. What I would recommend is less email, more phone calls, and when you can, leverage video chat because this is really going to satisfy that need for face-to-face interaction that so many of us are lacking right now. And also in the same vein of staying connected to the team, don't forget that social distancing does not mean the end of socializing. We're lucky to live in an era where we have so many collaborative technologies that allow us to connect in different ways. And I would recommend organizing virtual happy hours, which will allow employees and allow peers to stay connected off the clock and to connect informally with their coworkers. For our managers, I think this is really about being more mindful about when and how we connect with our employees. So I think on the one hand, this looks like setting up regularly scheduled check-ins with your employees, but also I would strongly recommend reaching out informally to catch up on work and talk about what they need to support their satisfaction and contribution. In the same way that you would if you ran into each other in the break room while you were both making each other's coffee. Just have a simple conversation, check in on a project, see how the person is doing, what you can do to support. It doesn't have to be always a scheduled thing. We can just reach out in that informal, spontaneous way. For anyone who is working in an organization that is providing essential services, I think that daily huddles and check-ins will be absolutely essential for boosting morale as well as keeping the team aligned with top priorities. And I would say whether we're looking at this from the perspective of peer-to-peer, colleague-to-colleague, or manager to employee, make sure you're not just talking shop. It can't be all business right now. Check in and see how people are doing emotionally and psychologically. A simple, is everything okay for you, I think goes a long way in showing that you care. And when you ask those questions, don't make it feel like a check the box. Really employ your active listening skills. Pause, give them room to speak, and make sure to listen for what they're not saying, right? People might say they're fine, but their facial expression, their tone of voice might tell you something completely different and might give you a better idea for what's really going on. And speaking of care, I think that there's also things that can be done at an organizational level to demonstrate caring for the workforce. And this might look like providing flexibility in scheduling, implementing hazard pay, providing increased or unpaid or unlimited paid sick leave. All these things are going to show that you're supporting your employees during this time. So we talked about contribution, we talked about connection. Let's move on and take a look at communication. Communication is always important.
Hey, Colleen, have we lost you?
I dropped my phone. My headset fell out too, but I'm back, everyone. So we're talking about communication, why this is important. It's always important, but it's particularly important right now because people are adjusting to this new normal, and the situation is still rapidly evolving. And in that context, people want to stay informed of what is changing and why these changes are taking place. So, Marianne, what would you say in terms of what effective communication looks like right now?
Well, so I have a lot to say and not a lot of time. So first off, I want to encourage everyone in the back of the slides, we have a link to Leah Clark's webinar, Steady Communication in Unsteady Times. And it's a 45-minute deep dive into this topic, and I really encourage you to check it out. I want to acknowledge that the words on the slide seem pretty straightforward, and yet this is really hard stuff. The one point that I want to make as we are moving forward through the session is transparency. And when you think about transparency, I want you to be thinking about it as more than honesty and sharing what you know and you don't know. We talk a lot within our organization about showing the math. And that's an idea that comes out of middle school, actually. And you may remember this, or you may have children at home who are doing this right now, where you only get partial credit when you have the right answer. The way to get full credit is to actually show how you got to your answer. And this is really important because leaders are thinking a lot about these difficult decisions. And when they get to the point of communicating, they want to just share the information and move on because they've been processing, but the workforce hasn't. So by showing the math and sharing the process of decision making, I'm not talking about business rationale, I'm not talking about what's in it for them, but sharing the steps taken to get to a decision, that will bring people along so that they will be able to move forward with you and take the action that you need them to take. And finally, as we are actually 20 minutes goes by very quickly, we're at the last C, which is confidence. And certainly, I think we're all looking for something to center us and quiet the storm. And Colleen, what are some of the ideas that we have around doing this without being all Pollyannish or overpromising?
Absolutely. So I think the first thing is to decide on and stick to a course of action that's going to address the immediate needs of the organization and your employees. This is not a time where you want to appear indecisive or incoherent in your decision making. You don't want to change the quote unquote strategic plan every other week. And also, as you're making these decisions, don't assume that people know what you're going to do. Make sure that you communicate that plan, because if you do not communicate that plan, people will fill in the blanks for you. And be specific about what is going to happen so people know what to expect. And like Marianne just said, make sure that you show the math. I would also recommend, when you're talking about that plan, make sure to link it to the organization's future success. What does that future look like, and is there a possibility that the future could be even better than the past? Now, a lot of this appears to fall on the shoulders of our executive level, but you might be a manager who has an executive team or senior leaders who are either not excelling at this right now, or perhaps they're not even doing it at all. What I want to suggest for anyone in that position is that you don't have to wait for your senior leaders to do something. There's no reason that you can't articulate a plan and a vision for your team and fill that gap right now. And not only can you fill in the gap, but you can get your team involved in problem solving and actively participating in decision making. This is going to satisfy that human need for involvement, but also allow them to make a difference in what's going on in the organization. It'll give your employees a sense of agency and perhaps even allow them to be everyday heroes in your organization.
Very well said, Colleen. Thank you for that. So, all right, we're a little bit past 20 minutes here, and we wanted to acknowledge that our goal was to get some ideas on your radar and to trigger your thinking on what you can do to create more great days for yourself as well as your colleagues. And we do want to mention that, we've mentioned it before, but we have a number of resources that I think can help you get into more of the details for how to do this. And I also want to thank you for your time today and for, I think we've talked a lot about how we're not in control of a lot of things. And I hope that some of the ideas that we brought to the table today will help you within your sphere of control, because I think Colleen used the word agency, and we can't rely on other people making us engage. We can't rely on the folks at the top to figure it out all for us. And so that's where the model of shared accountability is so important. Kayla, do we have time to field a question?
Yeah, we did have a few come in, so we'll go ahead and keep it going. Well, thank you both for your very important discussion, and we will, I know we're over a couple minutes, but we will go ahead and take some Q&A. If we have several more come in, maybe what we'll do is address them in a follow-up blog post. Obviously, there's still a lot more information that they could discuss, so I encourage you to continue the conversation with Marianne and Colleen beyond today's session. As you can see, their contact information is available in the slide deck. I'd also like to remind you that the recording and the slides from today will be sent to the email address that you provided when you registered. And obviously the resources that she mentioned will also be in this slide deck. We'll be emailing that to you as well. So we'll go ahead and dive into some of these questions. If you want to keep them coming in, the Q&A module or the chat field is a great place to put this. So MA and Colleen, you guys can decide who wants to take this, but what about people whose situations are interfering with performance? How can you achieve the both and that you described? I know you mentioned kids could be one of those situations. I have two. I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. It's certainly been a challenge, and so I'd love to get your thoughts.
I'll start, Colleen, if it's okay with you. A little side note, Colleen and I usually do this together in New Jersey, and we're in 2 separate states right now. I would suggest redefine success, which is something that I had shared earlier. You want to redefine success, redefine contribution, and go back to that mantra of not everything is important. I also think if you have a strong relationship with them, you can coach them potentially on redefining their personal version of success. So our team recently had a conversation about dishes in the sink, and folks had very different perspectives on what was okay now versus what used to be okay. And I think that it's a small example, but it's really stepping back and seeing what's possible. And by the way, when I say coaching, that doesn't mean giving someone advice. That's probably not the thing to do, but also giving grace. One of my favorite colleagues just shared this the other day. We're all working hard. There's a lot of good intent, and we have to allow for grace, and I think that is going to help in getting through bumps in the road.
I love that. Thank you. And then what about surveys? How do surveys fit into your strategy right now?
So I'm going to say call Colleen, but Colleen, what's the official answer?
Absolutely. So this has been an ongoing dialogue that we've been having with clients. And I think that in spite of everything, it's still important to gather that information, because the reason that we do the survey, that you implement a survey, is because you want to have information that's going to allow you to make the best decisions for your employees and for your organization. So you want to maintain your listening strategy, because that information is going to be more important than ever at the moment. With the situation changing on a daily, if not an hourly basis sometimes, you really need to get that information so that you can respond in an agile manner. I think what's important for organizations to keep in mind right now in terms of their measurement and their survey strategy is, how do we perhaps need to adjust this and tailor this to reflect the needs of the moment right now?
Got it. So it sounds like what we're not talking about is do your regular annual engagement survey and compare it to last year and have a benchmark. That's not what we're talking about. It's getting the information you need that's relevant to help your organization move forward, right?
Exactly. And, Marianne, our approach to the survey is always that the survey is just the starting point, right? We take a survey because the survey is going to enable us to take action and to improve things. So it's not just about the measurement. It's really about what are we going to do with this information. So to your point, that whole aspect of benchmarking and how does this compare from year over year, that's probably less important than getting that information quickly so that we can act on it and respond in the moment.
Well, wonderful, guys. This was a fantastic conversation. We'll go ahead and start wrapping things up as we're approaching the 30-minute mark. I do want to say thank you again to today's speakers, and thanks to everyone who attended for your time and attention. We do hope that you'll join us again for future webinars. We have several available, and registration is available on our webinar page at gpstrategies.com. Thank you, and I wish everyone a wonderful rest of your day.
Great. Wishing you great days at work, everyone. Thanks so much. Thanks, Kayla.